It's usually either you stay together and you get stronger or you end up divorcing. Mother and father wounds actually usually show up with the most business and professionally successful men.
To some extent, it allows them to focus, right? Because money and power and that prestige, it makes them feel safe. It gives them something to focus on.
She's the status symbol. She's coddling him until she gets exactly what she wants. And then she's cold because there was no actual attraction. There was no value system. There was no foundational relationship.
What does attraction really mean to you? Welcome back to the I Wish You Knew podcast. My name is Sarah Dawn, and I am joined by my friend Adam Lane Smith, and we welcome Elise Michaels to the podcast today.
This episode is brought to you by Rugged Legacy Grooming Supply. Elise, thank you for joining us today. Can you please tell the audience one thing that you wish they knew about the field where you work?
Well, I work with men's mental health, so I wish that a lot of people understood men actually do have the capability to be empathetic and vulnerable, and that it's not a weakness, but something that both men and women have the ability to have.
I love that answer. I've been in the masculine circles online and in men's space for about 12 years now, and I was a licensed psychotherapist for many, many years. And I helped a lot of men with trauma and issues like that. And one thing that I like about both of you is that your work is very authentic. There's been a lot of women who've come into this space. Usually you can pick them out because they start off in bikinis or they start off like something crazy. And you can tell that they don't care, right? They're here to milk men, make them feel loved and cared about, and then they start pitching all these things. And it's one reason I started working with you, Sarah, was you were very much the opposite of that. You took care of the men who were in your audience and you actually gave them tips that would help them. And Elise, I ran across some of your content just this morning, which was fascinating. And you said, look, I have all of these resources available for you, and I want you to get help. If you need a fast track, I've got these other pieces, but I am here to help you. And that was so encouraging to see women being authentic in that space for helping men. So what is one thing that has really touched your heart about men that you've worked with, or one issue that you see over and over again?
Well, I appreciate that, first of all. Thank you. I'm sure just like Sarah, I built my business off of being honest, being authentic, because I feel like a lot of people just need that, just genuine care. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that repeat as far as men's mental health go, but I see a lot of men usually struggle with relationships and just connection because they're taught, ignore your emotions, ignore how you feel, ignore your intuition, basically. Yeah. And so when it comes to connecting with a female or people in general, they tend to just ignore any emotional connection and strive for the surface level connection.
One of the things that I really, really resonated with your content, and actually a lot of our followers are very similar. So when we are both sharing different things, the biggest thing that really that hit is the mother-father wounds that you talk about a lot with men. So what is something that a man can do to even recognize that he has these wounds potentially, whether it's a father wound or a mother wound? Like, how does that start to show up in his life? Does it affect his professional career? Does it affect the type of women that he picks? You know, when you're kind of first seeing a man or coaching a man, what are some questions that you ask to understand where he's coming from?
Yeah, that's such a fantastic question. It's actually really ironic. I've found the deepest mother and father wounds actually usually show up with the most business and professionally successful men. Yeah. And you wouldn't naturally think that because you're like, oh, they're doing very well to the outside world. They've got a lot of accolades. They have a lot of material possessions, but they don't have the internal fulfillment. They don't know how to be vulnerable. They have rocky marriages, and it's all behind the scenes. So men usually know when there's something missing, but they never usually attribute it to mom or dad. A lot of times because society also tells us, we don't want to be in the victim mentality, right? So we're like, we all grow up with what we know as far as parents, and a lot of us don't know that maybe neglect is also something that impacts us, or working hard but like not being emotionally available. A lot of men have father wounds because their fathers just weren't there. So it can show up in a lot of different ways, but surprisingly a lot amongst working professionals.
Now, do you see that they typically will kind of overcorrect and go the opposite direction? Do they have a healthy relationship with masculinity, or do they go on the opposite and marry typically a very, more masculine woman or more controlling woman? Like, how do you see these patterns showing up?
It's different, I actually think, by personality type. There will be hyper independent men who don't rely on anyone or anything, and they tend to be more avoidant. I find so they will tend to attract more anxious women, more toxic relationships where they're just relying on him for everything, and he just can't connect, he can't fulfill that need. But there are also men who act as the nice guy, and they overcompensate as far as like trying to be emotional, trying to be very supportive. But what they're doing is they're actually becoming codependent, and then they become the white knight, and they rescue this female from, her toxic life and her inability to take care of herself, because it provides some type of fulfillment for them in their masculinity.
That is so true. I coach a lot of male executives, and that avoidant type being at the top, it keeps, to some extent, it allows them to focus, right? Because money and power and that prestige, it makes them feel safe. It gives them something to focus on. They get that fix of, I've achieved this and this. But there's so much emptiness once they hit their 40s or their 50s or 60s because they haven't connected authentically. And what I've noticed is a lot of them at that point, everything starts to it's like food tastes like ashes. Nothing is enjoyable to them anymore. And they know there's got to be something else out there, but they can't envision what it is because they've never experienced it in their life. Do you have any tactics that you use to help men understand that and break through that? Because that piece I've noticed is so hard. If they can't visualize what love is, right? How do you help them figure that out? I'd love to talk shop with you on this.
I mean, there's so many different ways, but, working with trauma, you have to start off with nervous system regulation, understanding how the body is responding to its environment, getting them to understand how to feel safe, because the brain and the body are different. And so the body has its own kind of brain. And if you're not understanding how your body memorizes certain situations and certain relationships, then you might react differently than what your brain is thinking. So you have to start recognizing your habits. You have to start recognizing the patterns. And once you do that, you can start breaking them to build new ones. But you tell me, the presence of a mother, and I have a lot of men who experience mother wound. What would you say is the impact of a mother on her child's life? Does that impact how they perceive love at all, or?
Let me tell you a little bit about our sponsor today, Rugged Legacy, because guys, there is nothing better than a well-kept, well-groomed man. So if you want her to kiss you more without feeling like she's kissing sandpaper, this does the trick. Works 99.9% of the time.
Yes, that wound is immensely deep. A lot of men grew up either trying to caretake their mother's feelings, so they never want to be around a woman again because it's exhausting and they got no payoff from it, and it feels like a trap, right? And a lot of these men become very avoidant. They got very little connection, very little oxytocin, if you want to go into the chemicals, and they bonded very poorly, so they don't want to walk into that again. Other men, their mom gave them the oxytocin and then backed off, or gave them a drop, right? Inconsistent love. It seems worse than no love at all because it creates a junkie who's chasing it obsessively. You talked about men who are the nice guy. That's that junkie syndrome where they are just chasing it obsessively. I have plenty of coaching clients and executive men who come in, and usually they run their own business because they can't be in the hierarchy anymore, right? The avoidant men, they go up the hierarchy with executive stuff. The anxious nice guys or the disorganized type, the fearful avoidant, they have to do their own thing because they can't let anybody else have that power over them. They've distinguished that. But then they get a girlfriend and they give her everything, and they get ruined over and over and over again. Sarah, talk to me a little bit about what you see with that, because I know that you see the same patterns we do.
Same types of patterns. And what I find is that people think that they have to give up their identity to heal. So they feel as though they have to change. They've become their identity and work, their identity and their relationships, the way that they have done things, especially I think men tend to get, really attached to their work. They think it's a part of them. And so when I work with them, my goal is to teach them that you can still be healthy. You can still have that drive. Your drive isn't going to disappear, right? Like you can still be this amazing entrepreneur. You can have everything, but it needs to have you need to have a different aspect. You need to have a different balance in your life, and you can have it all, but it can be healthy.
That is a great point, because so many of the men who come to me, they say, Adam, I got really strong doing these things. If I fix my attachment, am I going to get weak? Am I going to get soft? Is my productivity going to go down? How do you handle that? Do you see your coaching clients that they get weak and homeless and they live under a bridge, but they're really happy? What is it like when they actually fix that connection?
I mean, they definitely don't get homeless. I was going to say, I was going to say to Sarah, they do have to change their identity, though. Yeah. But they're all afraid about losing their edge, because our survival instincts give us a special set of skills that get us to the top. Yeah. Right? And so the thing is, once you're at the peak, though, this is what I tell my clients. I'm like, the problem is you're hitting this midlife crisis, not because you're running out of skills or whatever, or something's wrong with you. It's because you reached this peak that it took you decades to get to, and now you just can't use the same skill sets to get to a new peak that you've already had. So you do have to let go of some of these behavior patterns and some of these identities and some of these things that you've, attached yourself to in order to get to the next level. But it doesn't make you weak. It just makes you different.
Right. Here's a piece I'd love to explore for the men in the audience, because we just hit them with a landmine that you can be at the peak financially and business-wise, and you're not going to be happy. It's not going to bring you what you've been looking for your whole life. What does that look like when they fix those problems? I call them the attachment problems. You call them mother wounds and father wounds. We all call them different things. We all mean the same thing. What does it look like for you, for the men who are watching this? Can you tell them, this is what you're missing? This is what is on offer that you don't even know has been on offer this whole time. How can they visualize that?
Well, like you said, if it's not a felt experience, it's hard for people to visualize. It's kind of like everything that you thought the material objects would get you, that the awards would get you. That's what you feel when you're at the peak of actually knowing yourself. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like a lot of men spend their life crafting an identity of what other people expect of them in order to be a man in the eyes of society. So when they become a man in the eyes of themselves, it's this power and this presence, like they can do anything. And suddenly people are respecting them more. Suddenly they enjoy the little things more. Yes. Suddenly their kids are actually listening to them and want to spend time with them and are actually a lot calmer, because when you change, everything changes. So it's not like we address all these symptoms. I call them everything you're complaining about, your anxiety, or you can't sleep at night. Usually they wake up in the middle of the night, their stomach's hurting, their mind is racing. All these things are just symptoms. I don't address any of those. I address how to get back to your steady state of presence and consciousness, and when you do that, all the rest aligns for you.
Now I'm wondering if there are women who are watching and they see this and they experience men who struggle with some of the things that you teach men with, right? How do they adapt? How do they bring this up? How do they, because I'm sure they also have to change with the relationship. That could be a huge problem if they've been used to 20, 30 years, or if they're dating, the dopamine hits aren't there, the chemistry changes, your attraction changes when you heal yourself. So I really wonder from both of you, how does the woman respond to these things? Could it potentially blow up, which I do see sometimes, or do you invite the woman along the journey with you?
Who wants to go first?
I'd love to hear your take on it. I do have an answer that I'll come back with afterward, and if we disagree, that's okay. But I'd love to hear your take on it first.
I mean, when I'm working with men, usually my clients are actually married or, just kind of getting out of a relationship. But it's usually either you stay together and you get stronger, or you end up divorcing. Because when somebody becomes like a relationship is a container. And when you get together, there's rules of that container just based on your previous experiences and your behavior patterns and stuff that people get used to. So if someone drastically changes and the other person is not willing to change, it breaks the container. And sometimes it's not reasonable to expect your partner to change and do every single thing that you're doing, because they didn't agree to that when they first initially got with you, right? They had certain expectations and rules that you agreed to initially. But if it's a cohesive relationship and it's a partnership, then ideally your partner's going to grow with you and maybe not do exactly everything that you're doing, but work with you to develop a new identity for themselves as well, where you guys get stronger together. Or else, it breaks because the rules are different now.
That's very true. And men ask me this, interestingly. I don't know if you ladies get this when men come to you for coaching, but all the time I get, okay, Adam, if I fix this, what's my wife going to do? I get this all the time, right? Like, how is she going to react to me? And I tell them this interesting statistic is the research shows that when a man converts to a new religion, fully new religion, 97% of the time his wife will convert to that religion with him. But here's the point, is converting to a whole religion, that's almost what you're doing here. It's a life experience. It's a life approach. It's a religion approach, almost to your feelings, your thoughts, and how you connect other human beings. So here's something interesting. The only times I have seen marriages crack apart when they fix the attachment was 2 times. Two issues, right? Number one, when the wife has a personality disorder, right? I had a gentleman come to me. He was top of his business. They had an $8 million prenup in place. And he came to me and said, Adam, I don't know if this is fixable. I need you to give me an absolute yes or no if this is fixable. So we sat down, we did a full assessment, we discussed everything. There were so many red flags for a potential personality disorder. Didn't diagnose, but so many red flags. And I said, okay, let's give some tests. Let's see how she responds when you try this and this and this. And the explosions were out of control. So we could say, it almost certainly absolutely will not work. Rest assured that this was not something you could have saved. And he was so at peace with that answer. That was what he needed. The other time, though, is when men have spent 20 years burning their wife out, right? I'm going to change and then go back. I'm going to change and then go back, right? I call it the 3-week wave. I'm going to change 1 week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks, you're back to normal, right? That right there, if you have burned her out that bad where she feels nothing for you, and you're dead to her, or if she has a personality disorder. Anything else, you can come back from. That's what I have seen.
Mm-hmm. Right. When it gets to the point of apathy, everything is gone. And that's something that's really sad for men, I think, is we have conditioned them not to feel and not to be intuitive and almost to kind of like minimize small problems. Like I compare it to like a Jenga game. Where like, as long as men see the structure still stable, they think everything is good. But women account for like the little pieces, and every time a little piece is out, they're seeing it get more and more unstable. So then when another little mistake is made and the thing comes crashing down, men are like, oh my God, like, why didn't you tell me? Or you should have communicated this differently. And the woman is like, I communicated this for like 5 years. And so I think I would love to encourage men to just learn more about themselves and their own vulnerability, simply because, you know, if a woman loves you, she's communicating to you all the time. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like a little bit sad because by the time he recognizes, usually it's too late.
What's one communication that your male clients miss all the time? Because there's guys at home right now saying, oh, am I missing it? What's one or a couple tactics that women use? Or that I'll pitch that to both of you because you're both women.
I don't know if I can present a tactic like you might be able to, but, you know, men are just so logical and straightforward. So men will take things just as they are, and women are more about concepts and ideas. And so it's not like they're trying to get you to read your mind all the time. Some women are definitely like that. Like, you should read my mind. You should know what I like. But I think men, if they could understand, sometimes it's more about the effort or the understanding, or just like during conversations, they don't need to solve the problem. If they just listen, like, and be present, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes it just solves the problem themselves, because ideally they're partnering with a capable woman who can solve her own problems. She might want your help, but she doesn't necessarily need it. So just being present is like good enough.
I think men confuse vulnerability, right, with crying, with weakness, with sharing all of this deep, dark, you know, intense feelings, and they're going to have those feelings just thrown back in their face. But sometimes it can just be as simple as, you know, Sarah or Elise, like, I don't really have the words for this. Maybe you can help me understand what I potentially am feeling, or, you know, just kind of let's work through this problem together, and let me share with you what it is that where I'm feeling it in my body, or what's happening for me. Because a lot of that is a beautiful thing. And I think if women heard men speak that way without, you know, that directness, but sometimes, of course, I think women talk to women, or women talk to men like women, and men talk to women like men. So the shutdown happens before the conversation can even begin, because we're like two rams. Now we're just fighting for the power and the space, and nobody's being heard. But I think if men understood, they have the power to be vulnerable, but it's learning the difference between really vulnerability versus weakness versus asking for help versus I'm just going to kind of lay everything on you, and then the woman's going, oh gosh, I don't know what to do with this, because then she's potentially overwhelmed with trying to mother or to nurture. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you have some feedback on that.
Oh, absolutely. It's when I talk to men online, if I ever say, hey guys, she wants vulnerability, men instantly picture themselves. Yeah.
Target you.
Right. Well, they get mad.
Liar.
And scared.
Women don't like that.
Right. And here's what they imagine is walking in the front door, falling down on the floor in front of her, crying as a sobbing mess, right? Sucking his thumb and saying, I don't feel good. And that's what they picture for vulnerability. And that's the worst possible way. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. What I teach men is the 4-step method for being solution focused when you share. Right? There's a lot of tactics for being more solution focused when you share about, here's what I'm sharing. Here's why I'm sharing it. Here's the feedback I'm looking for from you. Can you give me some feedback? Not make my decision for me. Like you said, don't be my mommy, but what do you think about this? How could I solve this? What's an idea that I haven't thought of yet? Or even just, I'm not sure what I'm going to do about, but I'm sharing with you right now where I'm going at, so that when I have an angry face on, an angry look later when I'm thinking about it, you know why I'm looking angry. That's why being solution focused in your sharing is really helpful for a lot of men. Do you have a tactic or any approach or advice for men out there who are afraid to be vulnerable because they think it's pathetic?
Yeah, I mean, you have to know your audience, right? If you are someone who usually doesn't share and you've gravitated towards people who might not like you sharing, you might have chosen people who aren't going to support you. Yeah. So you have to kind of choose wisely to, I always recommend having a therapist or a coach who can help you become acclimated to being vulnerable and how to structure it, because I also think if we haven't done something, the pendulum swings to the complete and opposite end. So just like when people are setting boundaries for the first time, it tends not to actually be a real boundary, but it tends to be a bid for power or an ultimatum. Mm-hmm. It's like, so you have to kind of know your audience and then understand how to do it. And then, when you're knowing your audience, it should be pretty easy. Yeah. And I was actually going to ask you, Sarah, has there ever been a time where, you've had to practice being vulnerable, like having a man be vulnerable with you, or how did you gain that trust? Or was there a time where you didn't accept vulnerability from men? And you had to learn that or work through it?
Absolutely. Well, coming from somebody who has healed their own anxious attachment, it was terrifying because I didn't know how to hold space. And I think a lot of women don't know, they'll either go into ultimate kind of fear, like I got to run away from this because it's very overwhelming for a woman who has anxious attachment because men's emotions can be overwhelming, but sometimes you don't even know how to regulate your own emotions. So like regulating yours and hers and in yourself, and it just becomes very overwhelming. So there was times when I just didn't realize just be quiet, just hold space and have boundaries, right? And not let their emotions affect me, and really not make it about what was happening, really self-soothing, like learning how to self-soothe yourself so that you're not, they're telling you, their deepest, darkest secrets, and then you're looking to them for emotional regulation, and they're like, wait, what's, like, I need you to be kind of more, I wouldn't say in your masculine, but we trade roles oftentimes in relationships. You can't always expect a man to just be in this unmovable, unemotional space. So, okay, if it's a 70-30 split, that's great, that's fine. But when he does come to you as a woman who has healed herself, and to the women that watch, those are the important times that you show him that you can be there, that you can hold space, and that he is safe. And the loyalty that you get from that man, once he sees that and once he feels that from you, is like nothing will break that relationship, because that is the ultimate trust, the ultimate loyalty, the ultimate support. I want to talk a little bit about, I'm just thinking over here about my single men who I coach, because I see, we're talking a lot about couples, but what I see a lot of single men do is we have to kind of retrain them, myself, on what attraction like truly is, and what chemistry is versus what intensity is, versus a lot of them go after these women like the chasing, like the giving them the breadcrumbs, or they go after very beautiful women because they view them as potentially a bit of a status symbol. Like, I have all this, right? I have all the money, or I have all this, I have the height, I deserve this type of beautiful woman. And kind of, I wonder what your perspective is, if you have any single clients, or of course, Adam, realigning them to what is truly good for them. That a woman who kind of trauma dumps on the first date, or they'll go on like 8-hour first dates, or they will be attracted to a certain type, but that type tends to have a personality disorder, or they tend to have really highs and really lows. And there's so a lot of my coaching with my single guys is really attuning to slowing down. Like, let's slow down the dating process. Let's understand like what's happening within your nervous system. Are you dating based off of a values exchange? Do you have a plan for dating? Are you sleeping with them by date 2? Because oftentimes I see that they typically will charge right into a physical, intimate relationship, or, they'll come on super strong. And a lot of secure women will get turned off by that. That feels like love bombing. That feels like intensity, and it feels very chaotic for a secure woman. So they always end up attracting women who are typically a little bit more anxious and a little bit more detached from themselves. And then that's when the cycle begins. And of course, then 20 years later, they're stuck in a marriage where these things are exploding. And so for me, I'm kind of the coach that's preemptive of all that. Like, let's try and prevent this. Or they've gone through a divorce and they've seen you, and then they've broken up, and now they're single again, and it's perfect. I'm like, oh, we have a clean slate, and now we have to kind of change our paradigm of what is a healthy relationship, because that intensity and that chemistry is typically confused for that intermittent love. So I don't know, Adam, if you or Elise have tools that you provide for single men.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I love how you brought up the visual aspect, because men are very visual creatures. Everybody is a visual creature. You have to be attracted to the person, but I think it's actually, maybe you can back me up on that men do value looks much higher than women do usually. And they will sit through the trauma dump dinner if she's really hot. They will sit through any kind of crazy if she's really hot. It's like being hot like makes up for it. But it's like, unfortunately, there are a lot of women who understand this about men are the women who take advantage of men like that. So they spend the money on the cosmetics and the surgery, and they're the avoidant cold women who are just on a mission to have a contract, to have a baby, to have a lifestyle, right? So when a man is more focused on his initial biological attraction as opposed to the value system, like you'd mentioned, it can lead him astray, because then of course she wants to be physical. Of course she's touching on all of these things that are getting him addicted. Like you said, the dopamine hits. She knows exactly what to say. She knows exactly how to look. She's the status symbol. She's coddling him until she gets exactly what she wants. And then she's cold, because there was no actual attraction. There was no value system. There was no foundational relationship. So whenever I'm with my men, if they're single, I always say, okay, what are our core values? And what are we actually looking for in a relationship? Do you actually want a wife right now? Maybe you just want to have fun. Maybe you just want to date. But if you want to be married, then you have to be in husband mode, which means you have to act like a man who wants to get married, right? Not a man who's being party boy.
Right.
And I asked them too, what does attraction really mean to you? What is that? Break that down, right? Because oftentimes, just in general, I think women and men, they come up with characteristics, but they also rely on it's just a feeling. It's just chemistry. But sometimes you have to untangle that feeling, because that feeling could potentially be a trauma bond or something that goes way back that you don't even know that you're experiencing. You're like, I just have these butterflies when I'm around them. I'm like, oh, you mean that anxiety that you feel when they're not giving you attention, or when they're on the date saying exactly the right things that you want to hear?
What a lot of men here are experiencing when they're single is the closer they get to other people, the more scared or the more it hurts. It's called hedgehog's dilemma, right? The hedgehogs, two hedgehogs, they're spiky. And their dilemma is that they want to be close and they want to snuggle, but their spikes can hurt. So the closer hedgehogs become to other hedgehogs, the more it hurts them. And this is the same among humans who don't have the skills to try to prevent that hurt, to try to retract your quills, as it were, to try to shield yourself and shield the other person. So everybody watching the show knows I have a lot of kids. My daughter, my first daughter, she loves hedgehogs. It's one of her favorite animal in the entire world. And she has a book right now called Hedgehogs, where they want to hug. And they want so badly to hug, Horace and Hattie. And the whole book is them trying all these different things to cover their quills. With strawberries, but it's too sticky. With snow, but it's too cold. And all these different things they cover their quills with. And it doesn't work. Until at the very end, they find a laundry line with socks. And they nibble a hole in the sock. And they wear these big fluffy socks. And they are so comfortable. They're comfortable in their sock, but they also, when they hug, there's no pain, and they can hug each other. So every time they want to hug, they steal somebody's socks and ruin those socks, and they wear them as a little hug. So it's the hedgehog. And this is what we're talking about here, is teaching single men to find your sock, as it were, to be able to hug other hedgehogs where there's no pain at all. So to your point, right? And to your point, what is attraction and how do you shift that? There's 3 types of attraction chemistry. One is primal chemistry. One is you are my type, right? Guys have a type. For me, surprise, surprise, the first 4 girls I dated all had red hair. My wife, red hair. Both my daughters, red hair, right? My type was red hair. Guys have a type. And it could go back to Carl Jung and the anima. It could be your mom. There's all kinds of stuff. But you have a physical type. You also have, the type is more than just physical. It's how she presents, how she dresses, how she looks, how she holds herself. There's all kinds of type. Primal chemistry. You should never date off of primal chemistry. It needs to be, 50, 60% your type. Don't be the opposite. But next is personal chemistry, right? First date, can you talk? Can you laugh? Can you share things? Do you have similar ideas, similar conspiracy theories, similar religion, similar things that will keep you together and help build great conversations? But number 3 is attachment chemistry. And it needs to be at least 80% fixed where you guys can work together. Attachment chemistry is the sock. It's the hedgehog piece. We can retract our quills and love each other fully and completely.
Yes. And that's what I don't see so many dating coaches teaching. And it's so maddening because I will open up my feed and I will see the three things to do on a date, the 4 things to do on this, the 5 red flags, the da. But I don't necessarily think that you really need that information because I feel like that's just more strategy. And I think once you heal all of this, right, when you get in touch with your nervous system, when you heal your attachment, when you're present with the other person, when you understand your values, I just wish that there were more people doing what you're doing. There were more people talking about this because I feel they're very good at strategy, right? Like a lot of these successful men, they're like, okay, if I just do this, then I can fix this. Or if I just do this, then I can get the relationship. And so they think it's like, okay, I'm going to follow this person and they're going to give me this one piece of content and it's going to make all the difference. But what I found in my own personal journey was once you heal all of this, once you understand like how your patterns are presenting in relationships, you just show up authentically. You don't take anything personally. You understand that, hey, if it's not a good fit, there's nothing that I did. There's nothing that you did. It just dating becomes fun again. And I think I see so many people get burnt out, in relationships. They get burnt out in dating. They get burnt out because they are the strategies that other people are giving them work for a very short-term purpose. They do not work long-term to heal. And so they continue the cycles. They'll date for 2 or 3 months. They'll date for 6 months, maybe sometimes even a year. And then again, it all kind of crumbles. So I'd be interested to hear, what are some things that you could kind of give some tools, both of you, right? When you're going out and you're dating or when you're trying to find a relationship for men in particular, how do they get rid of all the noise and like show up as they are? Meanwhile, they have to have, the grooming products and get potentially a new, some couple shirts to wear, some good pair of jeans.
Shout out to Rugged Legacy.
I was going to say sponsor.
Yeah,
that's right.
Sponsored by Rugged Legacy.
Breaking the fourth wall.
But why hire a coach that is going to kind of dig a little bit deeper? Because sometimes I think men they're a little afraid, right? It's like I don't want to talk about my childhood. Like I just want a coach who's going to tell me what to do. how do we get through to those men not to be scared that this is the path to take versus potentially hiring somebody else who's just going to give them a Band-Aid?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think with what you said, a lot of men don't understand that it correlates, right? They think childhood and dating is like completely separate. So they want the strategy. So like, I don't necessarily know if I would hate on those coaches, because just like you have to have certain content that gets people's attention to then dive deeper. So I think, you have to kind of latch onto what people know and they're comfortable with, so then they can start to understand, oh, there might be something behind this. But I think dating nowadays has become really gamified. With the dating apps, it's like a game. It's like, how many swipes can I get? It's the dopamine rush. It's the validation. It's like not based upon any core values. It's like, how validated can I be in this arena? And so coaches are teaching how to be validated in the arena and how to win the game of dating, as opposed to how to actually address the core values of relationship, the family unit. And I think as a society, we're going away from the family unit. You have a really good family unit, like like a strong example of how, America was like truly founded is like, you try to be a family unit, you have the life of the children and, even individual roles. And I think we're just driven so far away from that. Everybody's being so independent. We don't want to rely on anyone. So now it's so opposite of codependency. It's hyper independency. And even if we're in a relationship, I don't need to get married. I don't need to have children. I don't need to rely. Well, why are you even in a relationship then? So it's like so far beyond, even relationship coaching. It's like they're just, how do I win the game of validating myself?
And I loved this when I checked some of your materials, because I did my homework on you. I need to know if women are real or fake when they're helping men. And you came across so authentic. I loved people can book what's called a clarity call with you. I loved that, because you're not, that's one, when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is the real thing. Because you're not like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to get chicks, and I'm going to teach you how to make them sleep with you on the first date. It's no, you work with me and we will get clarity in that first call. What do you do in a first call that brings clarity? How do you bring that light bulb moment of, it's not about racking up 50 people on your body count in the next week. It's about, how do you get them to do that?
Right. So, usually when men come to me, like you said, they watch a lot of my content, so they kind of know what they're getting into. So it's always asking, what's going on in your life? What do you want to change? Where do you want to get to? And then I ask them, what was it like growing up? What was your relationship with your parents? I'm like, not to get too therapist-y, but we just want to see the patterns. So it's not we're casting judgment, we're not playing the victim, but we want to see what you've gotten used to when it comes to love, what you've gotten used to when it comes to success or validation. Do we want to keep this or do we not? So then in that session, we're kind of building this roadmap of, they're like, oh, that's why I do X, Y, Z. That's why I'm attracted to X, Y, Z. That's why I'm always burnt out. And then when you figure out why you're always burnt out, you can start to say, okay, now we do this instead. Yeah. Now we do this instead. So we deconstruct the Lego set and we build something new from it.
That's awesome. Sounds like you and I are the same in those first sessions, deep assessment. Is that something you do as well? I bet it is within that first session.
Yeah. I think there's a trust component, obviously, that needs to be built between, just as anyone you're just first meeting. It's like, I try and share a little bit of my own story, my own journey, my own growth with them. And then that way they kind of, they feel a little bit more comfortable talking about some of the patterns, and you can typically come to it on their own, right? I'm just a guide. I'm just a conduit for, okay, so we've seen these types of patterns that have been enacting out in your relationships or in your life in general. Is that really serving you, right? Like, what is the payoff for that? And at that point, typically, I always say that pain, frustration, hopelessness is a great conduit for change. Yeah. So seeing that they typically, when they come to me, they're at their wit's end. They've tried everything and they just want the answers. Mm-hmm. So it's really starting out, identifying the patterns first, going backwards, understanding what they're not getting out of life and where they could be, and how much more peaceful, non-chaotic, productive, because when you're not thinking about your relationships all the time, and when you're not in your head all the time, and when you're when you're in a healed place, life, you can even 10x your business sometimes. Like you can 10x your dating results. You can, because it doesn't burn you out so much because you're not internalizing it. So really showing them the path forward and where they could be is very exhilarating to people and to my clients. And it's really fun to see them. I love getting the calls whether I'm having the best sex of my life, like I'm in the best relationship I've ever been in. I'm like, yes, we did it. And that doesn't have to involve going back and digging up the deepest traumas of your life. Yeah. Like it's just understanding how do we rewire the patterns. And it happens pretty quickly.
Isn't that great when the men you see them growing, you teach them emotional intimacy, it makes sense, they go apply the skills, they start getting changes. One of my favorite experiences was when my married clients come in and they pop onto the video chat and their wife is there. And I say, oh, hello. And he says, this is my wife. She wanted to meet you. And she says, I just wanted to thank you for teaching him how to talk with me. And our marriage is so much better. And we're so happy together. And I was afraid he would never get it. And they're so happy. Do you have moments like that? Do you have male clients, or they bring in their wife, or the guys are just pumped? What are some good stories where the guys watching can visualize, what would it feel like if I fixed these problems?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's really is the best feeling ever, right? And I think that's the true joy as like a therapist or a coach is when they get the win. Yeah. That's like what I'm in it for. I'm like, I just want to see you succeed beyond your expectations. Because usually when someone comes to you, they have expectations right here when you know they're going to end up here, right? So once they start to feel that, and even 2 weeks, once you've taught them how to regulate their nervous system, then all of a sudden the mind is no longer racing. They're so focused. They're like, yeah, I'm actually able to be present when I go home, and I'm spending more time with my kids. And my wife even told me that I'm acting different. And I'm like, oh, good. She noticed it. Like, yeah, she really mentioned something about it. And you're like, you're so stoked because what was at the edge of someone feeling so empty and so unfulfilled, they're like, yeah, now my business is actually growing again and I'm feeling more invested, simply because, they're just becoming more in tune with who they are and what they actually want and giving back to themselves. A lot of men think that in order to heal, they have to do more for everybody else or add more onto their plate. And when I have them as clients, I'm usually like, it's not necessarily doing more. We have to cut things out. And then we do more things that you enjoy, because usually you're drained because you're just not enjoying your life and you're doing a lot of things for other people that maybe they didn't even ask. Open door policy. So just having strategic time for you can improve your life so much.
Man, imagine if you got 90% of your mental energy back because you're not worrying, you're not guessing, you're not lonely. And then you also feel fulfilled and content with your life on top of that. Like, that's the change when you build that emotional intimacy in your relationships.
Where do you think society is placing pressures on men, right? I mean, I know we and I can talk about that in a lot of different ways because I have been raised by a lot of men in my life. And I feel that society is potentially doing men kind of dirty right now. How do you integrate that? I know you integrate that into your content, but also I feel that men, they feel like they have to give up some of their masculinity too, right? In order to be more present, or they feel as though society will banish them if they get in touch with their emotions. But what do you think society is doing to men right now, just in general?
Yeah, I feel quite bad actually for men growing up right now. I mean, a lot of my clients are already married. They've kind of, they're already in relationships. So they grew up in a different generation where a lot of expectation for men was to be the breadwinner and provider, but there was a role. The woman was the homemaker. But now it's kind of like they're expected not only to be the breadwinner, but I'm all for feminism, but the feminist movement has gone so far that it's almost like man bashing. Like, women aren't or men aren't shit, and and it's just really hard. So they feel like they can't win. They feel like if they open a door for someone, it's stepping across boundaries. If they even look to the left in the gym, they're going to be called out for harassment. It's so intense that men just feel like they can't talk to anybody. They can't make connections, and it's really hard because a lot of women actually would like it if a man came up to them as far as relationships go, because nobody wants this online dating stuff, but there's so many women who are also so aggressive, like, don't talk to me, don't look at me, that, you know, men are just like, whatever for women altogether.
Where do you see? Where do you see men?
Are you resonating with this?
And do you think? Yeah, I mean, I have my own theories on the feminist movement in general. I often just find it to be a container for women who typically didn't have fathers or didn't have some daddy issues themselves, and don't know how to trust masculinity and find it to be abrasive because they can't differentiate between potential healthy masculinity versus this toxic masculinity. They get confused, they blur the lines, so everything just becomes toxic. So I wonder what your perspective on that is.
Guys, before I walk on set, I make sure that I look good, and the number one way I do that is by using Rugged Legacy Beard Balm. This takes care of everything and holds it in place and gives it a nice shine. If you wondered why I have 5 kids, this stuff helped. So if you want to have 5 kids and if you want to look good in your best days, make sure you pick up some of this stuff right now. Listen, I grew up in California, right? I remember being 10 years old and my dad teaching me, hold doors for women, it's polite. And I remember at 10 years old, I held a door for a woman. The first time I ever was going to get to, I get to do this, like, because my dad always did it. And at 10 years old, I held a door and this woman walked through and screamed at me for being an oppressor and a chauvinist pig. I'll never forget, I was 10 years old. And if I had stopped there and taken that response to indicate this is how women really feel, I would have been traumatized and never spoken to a woman again. And there's a lot of guys in our society who have been burned by women who've hurt them. There's guys who grew up with difficult mothers. There's guys who have been injured by women in dating, right? Tons of my male clients come to me and say, I've only had one serious girlfriend. It was so awful. I'm scared to ever connect again. A lot of guys get burned. The truth, the painful truth, is that as families have broken up over the last several decades, right? A lot of women have had to step into more masculine roles to protect their family. Fathers have failed them. They left. They abandoned them. They didn't do their job. There was a lack of masculinity in men and the accountability. And the women, your grandmothers, had to step forward and be the men and protect the family. And so they raised their daughters. Don't ever trust men. Have a career. Men should come last. They will hurt you. So then there's another generation of women growing up that way. And now it's don't trust men. They'll hurt you physically. They'll do terrible things to you. They're disappointments. And we look around at the men now who are scared to be masculine. And they're afraid to step into their masculine because it's like, if I do that, that woman will scream at me, right? And it's me at 10 years old. Like, women will scream at you if you hold a door. I think the answer here is for men to stop caring a little bit what women think as much. Not disregard it, but stop being so afraid that women are going to scream at you. Be you. Be masculine because it's who you are. Be masculine because that's your best expression of self. And when you do that, you free the good women, who I honestly think are the majority of women in the world, who want to be feminine and they want to give you that love and care, but they cannot until someone else is providing that masculinity, and then they can trust you. So that's my answer. What do you think about that?
I think too, let's go back to like single men. There are certain cues that you can look out for, you know, from a woman. And I don't think it necessarily has to be like, oh, she had wounded father. Like she did grow up without a father. She's damaged goods. I'm like, no, that's not actually necessarily true. I think that women can do a lot of healing. And some of those women can be the most loyal woman that you will ever meet. But is she appreciative if you pay for the bill? Does she say thank you when you open the door? Like, is she, well, if she's drenched in a bunch of designer bags, like there's a difference between a gold digger who's just using you for your money and like telling you what you want to hear. Is it coming from an authentic place? Like, how is this woman showing up and recognizing these little tiny cues? Like, does she appreciate your masculinity? Does she, you know, just by little tiny things? And I think that once they start to see that, once they step into it, it's not that, you know, certain women, of course, potentially killed chivalry, but a lot of them still 100% appreciate it. And if she embarrasses you in front of a group of people, if you walk up to her and you talk to her and she's okay, fine, that's her problem, that's not yours. But sometimes they have these limiting beliefs and these ideas in their head before they even go up to women that it's automatically going to go a certain way. And that I try and encourage them, that's absolutely what's holding you back. You know,
Right.
you have to break through that and not take it so personally. And the ones that's you want to get to that. You want to get to that rejection. You want to see those women very early on, and then you can wipe your hands of them and go to the women that actually really appreciate that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because there's nothing embarrassing about being well-mannered. I think there's a difference between being masculine and just having good manners, and that's where we have to just go back to, what is the type of man I want to become, right? What is the type of woman I want to become? And if that's your core values, like, I'm going to open the door for people. I open the door for people, right? I'm going to be well-mannered because I want to be a respectable person. And if you let this idea of someone rejecting you because you're going to open the door for them stop you from exhibiting your respect and manners, well, then you're just doing a disservice to yourself, because you don't feel good. And you miss an opportunity to just put good energy out into the world. So I think you can never look foolish by being well-mannered. That's what I think.
So Elise, if men are watching and they're at the point where they're ready to make a change, they are ready to potentially heal their relationship or get into a relationship, where would you say is the first place to start? What's the first step for them to start transforming their life?
Always self-work, worry less about the other person and what you can do to impress them, and just worry more about, how stable am I? What am I looking for? What are my expectations? Because when you have all that on the table, it's so easy, like you said, to eliminate certain people and to really align. A lot of people are looking for their perfect partner in all the wrong places. They go to bars, or they go to places that they just don't like. They don't like the activities. Their friends just told them to go there. But when you're so aligned and you just start doing things you love, you just start meeting people you love, and it just gets a lot easier. So I say, really invest in a life you love. That sounds so cliche, but really it's like the easiest way, because then you really do start connecting with people who are very similar in their goals and their mindsets.
Well, it makes sense, because if you're going to invite a woman into your life, you don't want to
be similar.
Right. You want to have something. You don't want to have the apartment that's a lawn chair and a TV and an Xbox on the floor. Have a life that's full and rich, right?
I think that guys sometimes think that they might be waiting for a woman to bring that into their life, versus doing that themselves. Like, well, when I meet someone, then she's going to want to decorate, or she'll come in and, make a life. I remember, personal experience. I have told you this before, went out on a date with a guy who did have just a mattress on the floor. That's exactly, I was like,
you walk in and you're like,
yeah, we didn't even get to that point.
You opened a crack. I was like, you opened a crack of the door. You're like, I gotta go.
He was really proud of it. And I thought, okay.
He was
proud of it. And I thought, okay, this is interesting, but it is no knock to him. But I think it's women are looking for that integration. They're looking for you for that stability. They're looking for you to have a nightstand, to be a grown up, because that signals to her that it's not just about your furniture, it's about your internal space. How our internal space,
how do
and
you
our
take care of yourself and respect yourself? I mean, are you really getting the best night of sleep on the mattress on the floor? You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to have candles and deck it out like an Airbnb, like an extra toothbrush for me. Then I'm suspicious. But have a pillow, maybe two pillows. Maybe a comforter.
Yeah, maybe a comforter, maybe a headboard if we're going real fancy.
A lamp, perhaps.
But I would suggest, to get to really, if you want that woman, if you're trying to attract a certain type of woman, she is going to be looking for those things, and it's not shallow, it's not materialistic. She wants to see your masculinity. So that's just my 2 cents. I would invite them to kind of do an assessment of their life externally and internally, because a lot of times that will motivate you from an external point, as far as making your bed, getting good sheets, getting a housekeeper potentially to get your place. Even I worked for one session, I worked with a client. We decided to hire a move out or move in service to come and organize all of his stuff, because his house was just a mess. I saw it in the background of the Zoom call, right? Like there was just stuff everywhere. And I thought, you know what, we're going to pause on talking about our childhood here for a second, and we're just going to get your place in order so that you feel more order, and then we can start from there. So I think that's
I love that. It's also like intentionally creating space for a partner in your life. I actually have, like, my roommate right now, I live with a couple, and he told me that for 6 months he actually slept on one side of the bed, cleared out half his closet, left the dresser empty, because he was manifesting room for his like wife essentially to come in and be part of his life. So like being intentional about, do I have room? And you know, that was like a manifestation technique that he was using, but it is very intentional. Like, you know, I'm creating this energetic space for someone to come into my life and be part of it. And I have it for them already set up. You're looking at me like I'm ridiculous.
No, I'm thinking of all the times I've shared space with my wife for 15 years. That makes sense. I was thinking that when he does find a partner, when he has, that how easy it's going to be. She's not going to get the elbow in the face in the middle of the night, or she's not going to have to fight for sock drawer space.
Well, and she comes in and sees, and then he's giving her a key, and like this was for you, right? And she feels so taken care of. Like being masculine isn't necessarily about having all of the materialistic objects and stuff. It's how much space has he created that he's going to hold for me, right? And nurture me in his own way.
That's fascinating. There's a bird in South America that when it wants to mate, it clears a whole area just to show that it is that intent on finding a mate. And the female bird will fly in and look to see if there's any dirt, anything out of place. Is it nicely decorated? After that, they don't care. But how intentional is he in creating space for her? And I think that that's very true in humanity as well.
Elise, it has been a pleasure. I've been watching you for a very long time, so it's quite a treat for me to finally meet you in person. You are just as beautiful as you are over your reels. But I want to give you the opportunity to talk to the men that are watching and tell them one thing that you wish that they knew about your coaching, about being a man, anything you'd like.
So I really appreciate us connecting in person and having this opportunity, and that all the work that you guys are also doing for men. For any men that are watching, I just genuinely want you to know that someone cares and that there is so much hope in this world. We're not a lost generation. A lot of people love you. A lot of people want to love each other. And I think that together with all the work that we're doing, we can bring it back to a unit where men and women are working together and not being enemies. And it starts with you. It starts with all of us, right?
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
So,
what are some products or some things that you would recommend to men who are thinking of starting with you today?
Well, if they're watching my content, they want to work with me. I obviously have one-on-one coaching, but going more towards men's group. I have a men's group called Better Man, and we get together every single Sunday. I invite coaches just like Sarah to come in and speak, and I also have master classes that I give, and it's a way to connect also with other men, which is very important, very intentional. You heal mother wound, you heal father wound, and you actually create an ecosystem of men who are making a difference in the world. So wonderful. If anyone wants to join me with that, would love to have you every Sunday.
Where can we find you for those things on the socials?
Anywhere. Elise Michaels can be found at Micheals. If you type in Elise Michaels, the other one, you might have a different lady. But I'm on all socials, TikTok, Instagram, website as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So,
amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sarah Dawn. You can also find me at sarahdawnmoore.com. Adam, where can they find you?
I am online at adamlanesmith.com. I am Attachment Adam on Instagram and on YouTube, and I'm pretty much everywhere with coaching, with a course, with all kinds of products to help men get better in their relationships.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on I Wish You Knew, and we'll see you on the next one.